The royals turned out in full force as King Charles's nephew, Peter Phillips, married a nurse in a private ceremony in the UK.
Somewhere on the other side of the world, a woman who shares Peter Phillips' own blood went about her day while the royal family gathered in the Cotswolds to watch him marry. She is his half-sister, and most royal fans have never even heard of her. For more than 30 years, her existence has been treated like something the family would rather forget. So why was she nowhere near one of the most glittering weddings of the year, and what really keeps her so far from the rest of her family? Join us as we dive into a scandal that almost tore everything apart. The sister who wasn't there. On June 6, 2026, a tiny village called Kemble in Gloucestershire suddenly became the center of the royal universe. Peter Phillips, who is the late Queen Elizabeth's oldest grandson, stood inside All Saints' Church and married Harriet Spurling.
Well, it's been a royal fanfare in the UK overnight, with nearly the entire family gathering to attend the wedding between Princess Anne's son Peter and Harriet Spurling.
She is an NHS nurse who has been dating him for the last 2 years. The King and Queen showed up. The Prince and Princess of Wales made an appearance too. The cameras managed to catch every single smile, even though the British weather did exactly what it always does and rained on the whole parade. Even with all the cameras and endless media coverage, one specific family member was completely missing. Her absence actually got more attention than the long list of celebrities who bothered to show up. Her name is Felicity, and she is the daughter of Captain Mark Phillips, who is Peter's father. That makes her the half-sister of both Peter and Zara Tyndall. She was born back in August 1985, right while Mark was still married to Princess Anne. For pretty much her whole life, she has stayed completely out of the public eye. Most royal fans can easily name every random cousin and godparent in the family tree, but they usually have no idea she even exists. This woman shares a biological father with 2 of the most famous royal grandchildren on the planet, yet almost nobody could pick her face out of a crowd. While Peter and Zara spent their childhoods running around inside palace walls and massive country estates, Felicity grew up an entire ocean away. She had a completely different last name and lived a life that the royal PR machine completely ignored. It is a case of having the same father but ending up in 2 entirely different universes. So how does a woman end up connected by blood to one of the most photographed families on Earth and still manage to vanish from the picture completely? The answer begins with a hotel encounter, a pregnancy, and a secret that crossed an entire ocean. A scandal that crossed the world. In the mid-80s, Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips looked from the outside like a settled royal couple. They had married in 1973 in a ceremony watched by millions around the globe. They had 2 young children, Peter and Zara. They shared a love of horses and a sprawling estate at Gatcombe Park. To the public, the cracks were invisible, and the marriage seemed as solid as the stone walls of the family home. Behind that calm, the marriage was already in trouble, and Mark's life away from Anne was about to create a problem that no palace statement could smooth over. Accounts of the affair describe a brief encounter with a New Zealand art teacher named Heather Tonkin, who became pregnant soon afterward. According to reports, what happened next was not a case of a guy stepping up to the plate, but rather a man desperately trying to make his problem vanish. Mark apparently suggested that Heather get an abortion, but she flat out refused. She chose to keep the baby, and Felicity was born in 1985, thousands of miles away from the cameras that followed her father around. Her close friends and family ended up calling the little girl Bunny, which became a small private nickname for a kid whose actual father was a massive public secret. For years, the entire connection stayed completely buried. Mark apparently sent money to Heather for about 5 years, but he hid the payments as equestrian consultancy fees instead of calling it child support. That kind of shady setup only works if everyone keeps their mouth shut and the checks show up on time. On official paperwork, there was no daughter. There was just a business consultant. In reality, a little girl was growing up without ever getting to use her famous father's name. But Heather did not stay quiet forever. As the money dried up and her worries about her daughter's future grew, she decided the truth needed to come out. She wanted Mark to acknowledge his daughter and to provide for her properly, and she was willing to go public to make that happen. In interviews from the time, she made it clear that everything she was doing was for her child, not for herself, and that she had cried more than a few tears trying to plan for a future she could not guarantee. When the story finally broke, it went off like a bomb. A current member of the royal family had fathered a kid outside his marriage to the Queen's only daughter, and the proof was about to become impossible to deny. The perfect image of the royal marriage completely shattered right in front of the whole world, and there was no fixing it. The private arrangement that was held together by silence and fake business payments instantly turned into one of the biggest royal scandals of the decade. It became exactly the kind of story that sticks to a family name forever. Heather had lit the fuse, but the real explosion came when science entered the story. Because once the test results came back, denial was no longer an option for anyone. The day the secret broke. In 1991, the rumors turned out to be completely true. The public found out that Captain Mark Phillips had fathered a secret daughter in New Zealand, and a DNA test instantly backed up Heather Tonkin's claims. Felicity was Mark's kid. There was absolutely no way to use the standard, polite denials that usually cover up royal scandals, and no amount of fake paperwork could change a literal DNA match. The timing was a total disaster for the marriage. People who study the royal family note that Anne supposedly did not even want a divorce at first, but finding out about a secret child completely ruined any chance of saving the relationship. Anne and Mark had already separated in 1989, living increasingly separate lives under increasing strain. The news of Felicity gave the situation a hard edge it could not recover from. In 1992, the year after the paternity became public knowledge, the marriage formally ended in divorce. Mark moved out of the life he had shared with the Princess Royal, and Anne went on to marry Sir Timothy Lawrence later that same year, in a quiet ceremony in Scotland that could not have felt more different from the grand wedding of 1973. For the public, this whole situation was absolute tabloid gold. It had every single element people loved to gossip about, including a secret royal baby, a messy divorce, a New Zealand art teacher, and a captain who tried to hide his secret payments by making up fake business invoices. The newspapers completely ran with every single detail, and the story stayed in the headlines for weeks. This was exactly the kind of drama that sells millions of papers, and it blew up right at a time when the royal family really could not afford another public relations disaster. Because absolutely nothing brings a family together quite like a public financial audit proving that your dad was literally using fake corporate accounting to pay off his secret mistress. For the children involved, though, it was something far heavier than headlines. Peter was a teenager. Zara was younger still. Somewhere across the world, there was now a baby sister they had never met, born from the very events that helped end their parents' marriage. The scandal that entertained the nation was, to them, the breaking of their own family. Felicity had absolutely no say in the entire situation. She was just a kid caught in the middle of a massive mess that she had nothing to do with. And her name was already printed in the papers before she was even old enough to know what a newspaper was. It's interesting how differently the two sides of this story experienced the same moment. For the Princess Royal, the revelation marked the public end of a marriage she had reportedly hoped to save. Heather Tonkin felt vindicated after years of being asked to keep quiet. For Mark, it meant the end of his meticulously planned arrangement. And for one young girl in New Zealand, it meant that her name now belonged to the world's newspapers before it had ever really belonged to her. The same handful of facts shattered 4 different lives in 4 different ways, and only one of those 4 had chosen any of it. The world had its scandal, and then, as scandals do, it moved on to the next one. But for Felicity, the hardest choices were still ahead, and the family she belonged to by blood would remain a closed door. The sister who stayed away. It would be natural to assume that once the truth was out, the family would slowly find a way to come together. That is how these stories tend to go in films. Real life, and especially royal life, rarely follows that script. Felicity grew up far from Gatcombe Park, far from the horses and the cameras, and she has reportedly never had a relationship with either Peter or Zara. The distance was not a brief falling out, but something that lasted across decades and across major family milestones. Family members speaking to the press over the years have made clear that the siblings simply never connected at all. When Zara married rugby star Mike Tindall back in 2011, Felicity was completely missing from the crowd. She stayed back home in New Zealand instead of flying out for the big day. When Peter married his first wife, Autumn Kelly, in 2008, she was not there either. These were exactly the kind of massive public events where big families usually put on their expensive clothes and pretend to get along. And every single time, the half-sister from the other side of the world was just totally left out. Felicity's grandmother actually talked to the media right around the time of Zara's wedding, and her statements made the entire situation completely obvious. She confirmed that Zara had never bothered to contact Felicity, that absolutely nobody else in the family had reached out either, and that Felicity was totally fine living her own life far away from the whole mess. She even mentioned that the family over in New Zealand would not even bother turning on the television to watch the wedding ceremony, which is exactly how they handled all the other royal weddings in the past. There is a pretty clear reality in that image. A young woman who happens to be connected to one of the most famous families on earth simply decided to turn off her television instead of watching her own half-sister get married. There was no big public breakdown and no angry statements to the press. It was just a simple decision to stay inside her own regular world and let the royal family circus carry on without her. For a story that started with so much messy drama, her actual reaction was completely quiet. Most people, handed a connection like this, would be tempted to reach for it, or at least to watch from a distance. Felicity reportedly did neither. She did not chase the family, and she did not perform her hurt for an audience. She simply lived her life, and the family lived theirs, and the gap between them widened with each passing year that nobody crossed it. It is not like the royal family cannot afford a plane ticket. This is a group of people with enough cash to fly anyone anywhere on Earth, set up a private meeting completely away from the paparazzi, or just pick up the phone if they actually wanted to. The massive gap between Felicity and her royal half-siblings has lasted this long simply because nobody on either side has bothered to fix it. Sometimes the absolute hardest distance to cross is not the physical miles. It is just a solid wall of old grudges and decades of ignoring each other. It would be easy to see all of this as a cold family turning its back on one of its own, but the truth of the matter is more complicated than this, for there is another half-sister whose story took a completely different course, the other half-sister who belonged. Felicity is not the only half-sibling Peter and Zara have through their father. After he got divorced from Princess Anne, Mark Phillips married an American dressage rider named Sandy Pfluger. In October 1997, they had a daughter named Stephanie, and her situation in the family turned out completely different from Felicity's. While one half-sister was totally shut out of the family circle, the other one was welcomed right in with open arms. Stephanie grew up right in the middle of the family instead of being pushed to the outside. News reports about the Phillips family show that she actually has a genuinely close relationship with both Peter and Zara. It is the kind of bond that only comes from spending years hanging out together at family events. She was raised at Aston Farm near Gatcombe, on the same patch of English countryside where Anne's children spent so much of their lives. That proximity mattered enormously. Stephanie was not a name in a newspaper to Peter and Zara. She was a little sister who was actually around, part of the holidays and the horse shows and the ordinary days that quietly knit a family together over time. The closeness between them showed up during the moments that mattered most. Stephanie actually served as a bridesmaid and a flower girl at the weddings of her half-siblings, standing right beside them on their biggest days. When she had her own wedding, she reportedly asked Peter and Zara's daughters to be flower girls, and she even welcomed Princess Anne to share in the celebration. That is exactly what being accepted into the inner circle looks like, fully woven into the official ceremonies and the family photographs. Set the two half-sisters side by side, and the contrast is striking. Same father, two very different fates. One sister grew up inside the family circle and was invited to stand at the front of it. The other grew up on the far side of the planet and was reportedly never invited at all. The difference was not really about blood, since both share Mark Phillips. It was about who got to grow up close enough to be known and who did not. Even Mark's second marriage did not last forever, with he and Sandy reportedly separating in 2012. Yet Stephanie's bond with Peter and Zara held firm through all of it. Families are strange that way. A shared childhood can bind people together far more tightly than a shared parent ever could. And Stephanie had the childhood that Felicity never got the chance to have. As a result, one half-sister became a fixture at family weddings, while the other developed her own style. And the life Felicity chose away from the royal spotlight proved to be far more interesting than the secret she was born into, the quiet life Felicity chose. It would be easy to imagine that a woman cut off from a royal family might spend her years bitter or lost. The reality, by every available account, is the opposite. Felicity Tonkin built a full and grounded life on her own terms, and she did it without ever cashing in on the famous name attached to her father. The door to easy money and tabloid fame was open, and she reportedly walked the other way. She found her own path into the very world her royal relatives are known for, which is the world of horses. Profiles of the low-profile half-sister describe how Felicity, much like Zara, developed a deep love of horses and went on to qualify as a specialist equine vet. Zara Tindall ended up becoming an Olympic equestrian and a world-famous champion rider who won a silver medal. Felicity, who has never even met Zara, spent her own career working as a vet to take care of the same animals. The two sisters grew up oceans apart and have never even been in the same room, yet they both ended up obsessed with horses. Whatever traits Mark Phillips passed down to his kids, the interest obviously traveled across the ocean. Felicity is now in her early 40s. She is married to a polo player named Tristan Wade, which keeps her firmly planted inside the horse world she loves. She has stayed out in New Zealand, completely away from the British tabloids, and she has repeatedly turned down offers to sell her story to the media. Insiders claim there were a few times when she actually thought about telling her side of the story, but she ultimately decided against it because she did not want to cause a massive headache for everyone else. That kind of restraint actually says a lot. In a world where basically anyone with even a tiny drop of royal blood can easily grab a microphone and secure a massive payday, Felicity chose to keep her mouth shut and protect her privacy. She clearly did not need the wealthy family that refused to acknowledge she existed in the first place. Instead, she built her own career, her own marriage, and a completely independent life, doing it so quietly that millions of royal fans still have absolutely no clue she even exists. There is a real level of dignity in that choice that the massive 1991 scandal completely stole from her. When she was just a baby, she was splattered across the front pages of newspapers and defined entirely by who her father was and how badly he messed up. As an adult, she completely changed the rules. She became a vet, got married, and made herself a totally private person. She defined her own life through her actual work, instead of through a famous man's mistake. The big secret she was born into simply does not get to be her entire identity anymore. This situation raises a big question that sticks around long after the drama fades. If Felicity has built such a normal, happy life on her own, does she even care about the family that ignored her for 40 years? The reports show she is perfectly fine with the distance. She is completely happy hanging out with her horses and her actual friends. Meanwhile, across the world, Felicity tended to her horses while her half-brother prepared for the most important day of his new beginning. And her absence would only make the wedding that finally brought the rest of the family together hit louder. The wedding that reunited everyone else. By the time Peter Phillips planned his second wedding, the family around him had been through a great deal. His first marriage to Autumn Kelly had ended in an amicable divorce in 2020, and the two had agreed to share custody of their daughters, Savannah and Isla. Then came Harriet Sperling, an NHS nurse and writer, who first appeared at his side at the badminton horse trials in 2024 and slowly became part of royal life, from Royal Ascot outings to the family Christmas stroll at Sandringham. Their wedding in June 2026 became a genuine family reunion, the kind of gathering that brings everyone out in their finest. Coverage from the day itself captured the bride in a column-style lace gown and a striking diamond tiara, surrounded by the most senior members of the royal family. King Charles and Queen Camilla attended the ceremony at All Saints' Church before heading off to the Epsom Derby. The Prince and Princess of Wales were there, with Catherine drawing attention in an elegant outfit. The reception moved on to Princess Anne's Gatcombe estate, the same ground where so much of this family's story has played out over the decades. Peter's daughters served as bridesmaids, and Harriet's own daughter joined the newly blended family on the day, a small sign of two families becoming one. It was, in many ways, the picture of a family coming back together. After divorces and losses and years of difficult headlines, here was a happy occasion that pulled in the king, the future king, and the wider clan to celebrate one of their own. The bride had come a long way too, from appearances to a place at the very center of a royal weekend. The daughter of the late Mr. Rupert Sanders and Mrs. Mary Sanders of Gloucestershire is now firmly part of the story. There was also a pretty obvious sad vibe running underneath the whole celebration. The one person everyone actually missed the most was late Queen Elizabeth, who was Peter's grandmother, and was famously close with him. She had shown up for basically every single major family event for decades, so her empty chair at this wedding was impossible to ignore. It served as a blunt reminder that even on a massive party day, you can still feel a bit down about the people who are gone. Even with all that family togetherness, Felicity stayed exactly where she has always been, completely far away and totally uninvited. The news reports leading up to the wedding made it obvious that nobody expected her name to be on the guest list. There was absolutely no sign of a big family reunion between her and the half-brother she has never even met. The royal family essentially shut the doors and partied, leaving the unknown sister completely isolated on the other side of the world, while the cameras rolled in Kemble. The relationship that led up to the wedding day moved slowly and happened right in front of the public. After showing up together for the first time at badminton in 2024, the couple kept popping up at Royal Ascot, the Beaufort Polo Club, and basically every other event on the high society calendar. Every single outing just made it more obvious that things were getting serious. They officially got engaged in August 2024, after dating for a little over a year, complete with a classic 3-diamond ring and a very staged photo shoot in a sunny field. By the next Christmas, Harriet was already walking to church with the royal family on the Sandringham estate. By Easter 2026, her daughter joined the walk too, showing off the new blended family to the public. The wedding was just the obvious final step of a very careful, highly visible courtship. The question that has hung over this family for more than 30 years is still completely unanswered. Nobody knows if the door will ever open. There is no telling if there will ever be a day when the half-sister from New Zealand is finally brought into the family circle the way Stephanie always was. Nothing in any recent news report suggests a reunion is anywhere close, and Felicity has never shown a single sign of wanting it anyway. While family ties can sometimes pull people back together over the years, the reality is that everyone seems perfectly fine, keeping things exactly as they are. So will Peter Phillips's unknown sister ever truly come home, or will she stay the secret the family never names? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.